This is the story of Sir Ernest Shackleton, an Irish explorer whose bravery in the face of disaster made him the hero of the 20th century. Shackleton was born in Ireland in 1874. From a young age, he dreamed of adventure. He read books about polar exploration and yearned to make his own mark on the world. At 16, he joined the Royal Navy, seeing the world and learning the skills that would help him survive some of the worst conditions on Earth. But he felt there was more to discover, more to explore. So in 1897, he left the Navy to join Captain Robert Falcon Scott's British Antarctic expedition. Over the next several years, Shackleton led multiple expeditions into the remote and unforgiving Antarctic. Although many of these missions failed to reach their goals, Shackleton's reputation as a brave and resourceful explorer grew. And in 1911, he was knighted by King George V for his contributions to polar exploration. But Shackleton wasn't done yet. He dreamed of leading his own expedition to conquer the most challenging region of the Antarctic, the vast and frozen wasteland that stretched from the Weddell Sea to the Ross Sea. No one had ever crossed the Antarctic continent on foot before, and Shackleton believed he was the man to do it. On August 8, 1914, the Endurance set sail from England with 28 men and 50 dogs on board. Their goal was to reach the other side of Antarctica and complete the first-ever trans-Antarctic expedition. Among the crew was a diverse group of adventurers, scientists and support staff who had been carefully selected by Shackleton for their skills and experience. There was no turning back. The Endurance steamed south toward its fate. Just a few days later, on August 29th, tragedy struck. The Endurance became trapped in a dense field of ice in the Weddell Sea. Day after day, the men struggled to free the ship, but the ice was relentless. On November, the captain ordered the crew to abandon ship and take refuge on the ice. They managed to save most of the supplies, including food, fuel, and scientific equipment, and so they settled in for what they thought would be a long stay. Shackleton hoped that the ice would eventually melt and release the Endurance, but they waited in vain. The ship was doomed. On November 21st, the Endurance was finally crushed by the ice, splintering it apart until it sank beneath the frozen waves. Now stranded on drifting ice, with no shelter and almost no food, the crew faced howling blizzards and months of darkness. The temperature plummeted to 50 degrees Celsius and the men huddled together for warmth, rationing their meager supplies of food and fuel. Days turned into weeks and the crew's spirits began to dwindle, but Shackleton refused to give up hope. He kept a daily log of their journey and encouraged his men to keep going. "We must endure," he told them, "we will survive." After 3 long months, the ice drift carried them to Elephant Island, a desolate, frozen, uninhabited place. There was no rescue coming. If they wanted to live, Shackleton had to do the unthinkable, sail 1,300 kilometers across the deadliest seas on Earth in nothing but a small lifeboat. On April, Shackleton, along with 3 other men, set off across the stormy waters of the Southern Ocean in the lifeboat. The journey was terrifying. Waves as high as 90 feet towered over them. Storms raged and the temperature dropped to freezing. But Shackleton and his crew battled on, driven by the hope of saving their friends. Meanwhile, the remaining men on Elephant Island watched anxiously as the lifeboat disappeared over the horizon. They huddled together for warmth, subsisting on a diet of penguins and seal meat, waiting and hoping for a rescue that might never come. Shackleton and his crew fought against the elements for 16 brutal days, sleeping while standing and eating almost nothing but biscuits. Finally, on May, they sighted land, South Georgia Island, more than 1,300 kilometers from Elephant Island. But their ordeal was not yet over. When Shackleton landed on South Georgia, he realized that he was on the wrong side of the island. A mountain range rose 4,000 feet above the rugged coastline, blocking their path to safety. With no maps, ropes, or climbing equipment, Shackleton and his crew began the long trek over the frozen wasteland. They climbed for 36 hours without rest, battling blizzards, falling ice, and exhaustion. Finally, just as they were about to give up hope, Shackleton spotted a whaling station in the distance. Weak and frozen, he stumbled into the hut where he was found by the whalers who had no idea who he was. Shackleton was too gaunt and frostbitten for them to recognize him. But with warm clothes and hot food, he slowly began to recover. 4 months later, Shackleton returned to Elephant Island to rescue his crew. He sailed into the bay where they had landed and began searching for signs of life. As he scanned the horizon, he saw smoke rising. The men were alive. Every single one of the 28 men on Elephant Island had survived the ordeal. The world erupted in cheers when news of their rescue reached London. Sir Ernest Shackleton and his crew were hailed as heroes, having endured unimaginable hardships and emerged victorious. So why isn't this story better known? Because today's generation is obsessed with fictional superheroes. Shackleton was a real-life superhero. What makes his story even more remarkable is that it happened at a time when war was raging across Europe. World War I was at its height, and the world was consumed by conflict. yet Shackleton and his crew were able to endure the harshest environment on Earth and return home safely. In 2022, over 100 years later, explorers discovered the wreck of the Endurance, perfectly preserved 3,000 meters under the Antarctic Ocean, its name still shining proudly on the bow. The Endurance had been found exactly as it had been left more than a century ago. Shackleton had always believed that the Endurance would be found one day. "I feel certain that the story of the Endurance will be told in the years to come," he wrote in his journal. "There is something about her that makes me think she will live in history." And indeed she has. Shackleton may not have lived to see it, but the story of his incredible survival has inspired generations of explorers and adventurers. In a world that often seems too comfortable and safe, Shackleton's story is a reminder of the incredible strength and resilience of the human spirit. He showed us that we are capable of enduring the most extreme conditions and overcoming the most daunting challenges. Sadly, Shackleton never achieved his dream of crossing Antarctica, but what he achieved was far greater. He proved the limits of human endurance and leadership. Even though Shackleton is gone, his legacy lives on. His story reminds us that no matter how dark things may seem, there is always hope for a brighter tomorrow. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out the rest of our content for more amazing stories of survival against all odds. If you want to know the story of the real-life Spider-Man, then I recommend you watch the video about Alex Honnold next. Thanks for watching.